I recently finished a remote viewing practice target the other day. I want to talk a little bit about that experience and the way in which it was tasked, or the way which I tasked it to myself. It was a blind target. There's several websites out there that have target pools that are available. I'm not going to indicate which one that I used because I don't want to front load anybody that uses those sites as well. Um, but what I found when I was working these targets from the target queues, the target pools, I really wasn't having great sessions. I've noticed a correlation as a viewer when I get a real project to work on. I do my best work. When I have these practice targets that I'm doing just for myself to see, can I sketch the building? Can I make contact with the target? I've been very displeased with my results on that. So one of the things that I started doing, I've only done this a few times, is I'll create my own target ID, not from my mind, the same process I always use. I go through just through Google a random number generator, and I have it generate me an 8-digit coordinate, and then I'll task myself, basically just saying in my tasking, and I'll review it with you in a minute, that this target ID represents the target from the target pool. Now, when I do this, I have not yet selected the target ID from the random target pool from the internet yet. So as of the time of my tasking and of my viewing, the target hasn't even been selected yet. So this is also one of those experiments on, space and time, which I always enjoy doing. And I had some favorable results with this one here. So the way I set this up, I'm going to share my screen and I just want to share kind of my thoughts from the experience with this overall. I'll share screen two. Okay. The target was obviously it was Big Ben. Once I looked at the feedback, I did this on June 13th. I didn't look at the feedback until June 16th. Or I'm sorry, the 15th. It was like 2 days after the target, 2 days after I did this target. Um, well, I gave myself a random ID, 733741111. This target ID is a placeholder for a target ID from an online target pool that will be selected post-session. Viewer will collect data based on that tasking. I sat with that for a minute as I self-tasked that. I'll say self-tasked as I came up with that verbiage and I reflected on receiving the feedback and connecting with the target that way. I really made sure that I put my intention in after the target was identified. That's the target I was going to connect with. So I've tried this in the past and haven't had very good results, but I really put some intention behind what I was going to connect and how I was going to connect. After my session was completed, life got busy and it was 2 or 3 days before I could go to the website and pick a target. What's really got me going through my mind is what if I would have selected another number? Because there's target pools. It's got dozens of targets available to pick, probably 100 or so targets. So that's a pretty big number of randomness. So to get data that represents the target, I feel is significant. But it makes me wonder, what if, right? And I'm going to get into that probability thought in a minute. I'm going to go through my session here, and then I'm going to come back to my philosophical learnings here as a viewer. So looking at my target here, I started with the ideogram, and I can see right away at this angle down here is a structure. Now, I've been having trouble with my ideograms lately in terms of interpreting them, and depending on the session, depending on my mood, I interpret my ideograms two different ways. Sometimes I'll look at my entire ideogram, and it tells me a story. The different curves and shapes, a whole story comes together as I look at that ideogram. And that's an intuitive reading for me, much like when I would read tarot. I didn't know the meanings of the tarot cards. I went through, what does this picture tell me? What's standing out? What story is coming through with these cards? I like when the ideogram does that for me. But I also do rely on the language of the ideograms and the symbols for structures and life forms and space and energetics, all that stuff. But I don't use that vocabulary I need to improve my vocabulary on that. And for a while, my ideograms were all looking very similar because I was relying so heavily on that intuitive story piece. So I've been trying to focus back on improving my ideogram vocabulary again. Anyway, this one I clearly saw structure in there several times, and I labeled that structure and landscape. And describing it, bony, hard, box-like, weathered, cold, composite, and windy. I had an AOL of a temple. And I also had life walking around quietly. I had an AOL of public. The structure was beveled, angled, mirrored, shaped, functional, incorporated, and I had a water feature as well tied into this. Now, if you're looking on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see Big Ben here. It fits that, right? It's structured, it's angled. There's the water next to it that runs the I can't remember what the name of that river is now because I'm on the spot, but river runs next to it here. I did another ideogram here, and again, I got structure, and I also had life connected to it. It's hard, fastened. Let me zoom in a little bit here. Uh, I can't even read my writing. I was writing so fast. Angled, hinged. I had movement. I had a fountain and pavement. I'm not sure if there's a fountain by Big Ben, but that's the water I was picking up on. Splashing water, adjacent. An aspect of movement. Slow, mechanical, something wind-driven. This, I think, is noise here. Angled movements. Now, I'm sorry. Let me come back to that. Hypnotic or mystical feel. Movements are slow and purposeful, intentional, and by design. That's the clock. And in my research, from what I found was that the the tower itself is called Elizabeth's Tower or something, and the clock is called the bell that chimes at noon is called Big Ben. So this is probably the clock and the mechanics behind the clock that I'm getting here. I got to the life here, and life always tends to pull me, I'd say sometimes off target or on a tangent. And I think that's just my natural curiosity. I'm always drawn towards over describing a structure. I'm more interested in life and the energy surrounding that life and what's going on with that life. And that tends to pull me sometimes on a tangent, sometimes off target, sometimes into my imagination, something I'm working on. But I had this life. They were thinking, I thought maybe this is a sculpture, like a thinking statue. That was just my AOL here. They were pondering, they were deep in thought. And then I'm back here to the structure. I had glass like an angled building, tinted or dark, blues and blacks. It was picturesque. So I have this pointed structure here, and then you look to the right. I mean, that's pretty close. The only thing I didn't draw was the clock in the center of it here. That's a pretty good sketch here for me. And then I had this life gazing upwards, and I had an AOL of a tourist, which is common. Many lives pass by this daily and they don't take notice as if it becomes white noise in the background. If you live in London, I would imagine you don't stop and stare at Big Ben every time you walk past it, right? So now I'm focused on this life. They've got a backpack, they're exploring, there's awe and wonder, there's innocence. Is there arrogance? Is it ignorance? I'm wondering. Why is this life at the target? And I was playing on this sound of tourist, terrorist, packaging. There's a connection between this life and the target. At this point in time, it feels as if a movement, it is a movement of observation or a moment of observation. So that's the connection. The life's at the target. They're having a moment of observation. They are observing it. If you're a tourist in London, you're looking up at the tower, you're going to have that. That's what you're doing. You're observing, you're taking it in. There was a knocking or a clapping sound. There was wind, there was quiet, there was some trash on the ground, and it felt empty. I'm sorry, I moved forward 1 hour in time at the same location to describe. It was just quieter. Now, in the specific tasking itself, it was tasked for noon on the day of the session. And noon is when the bell chimes and rings. I didn't have necessarily specifics on the ringing, but an hour afterwards, it would have been quieter. This person is looking down, quiet, tired, defeated. They're in contemplation. And then moving to the optimal position to sketch and describe the target. I had this rocket, the word rocket, and I had the word momentum as an AOL. But again, this tower, looking at its basic gestalts, the Work-Collier effect here, it is the shape of a rocket. Am I stretching here? No, I think if you break it down to its basics, there were vibrations. It was circular. It was something to pinpoint. Again, this looks like it's the clock here. Looking at it from a different angle, it's raised, it's beveled. There's an elevation to it. Again, looking at this clock picture here. I had an AOL of Mount Everest, and then I started going on an AOL tangent of a person climbing. I kept seeing the backpack. What's in its contents? several items. They were heavy, it felt junky, it was disorganized, hard objects, cylindrical, chunky, tubey or tube-like. Nothing in there felt like an organized Everest expedition. Why does life have this backpack? Obviously, to carry things. It serves a function or purpose. Again, obvious. To preserve life was my AOL, tying it to the Everest analysis I was going through. But there was a quality of protection or reassurance, carrying the things one needs for a variety of reasons. A state of reassuring preparedness, maybe medical, maybe a rapid response, maybe a journey. So now I am starting to go into this AOL tangent, going off target here. Back to the structure. I felt pulled back to the structure, and back to the structure I went. It was angled and beveled. There was lights. There was a walkway. There were smaller structures I labeled as stalls or stables or cabins that were next to it. So again, Westminster isn't necessarily smaller, but it is shorter in stature is what I was thinking, what I was trying to describe here, if you look at some of these other visuals here. And I did find that there is something called horse guards, where there are stables within the vicinity. I was trying to get better pictures of it. I couldn't find it, but so maybe that's what I was picking up on in terms of the stables. I wrote down subway, bus, or transit. There is a subway station that does run underneath here, so I think I was on target there. With this long corridor and rows here, and you can see Westminster just looks like this long corridor here. Okay, describe the main purpose or function. There was movement of goods or shipments here, which isn't the main purpose of Big Ben, but there was a sense of awe and wonder. And here it is. I had again, the tower here, and I had this waterway. It's an energetic pathway, energetics in motion. And I labeled it. I questioned, is it a waterway? I thought expanding energetics outwards, slow moving and rising heat and temperature. Now this here with the energetics coming outwards, as the bell tolls at noon, you're going to have energetics coming outwards, right? I was beating myself up, and this is my growth as a viewer here again, wishing at first when I looked at my feedback, wishing that, man, I wish I would have just drawn the clock tower and labeled it Big Ben chiming at noon. But we're not supposed to name things in remote viewing, especially at my level. I need to stick to the basics and describe the target, not name the target. And I'm proud of myself. I think that's what happened here. I was describing the experience that I had here, describing the vibration, energetics coming outwards, right? I've got elements of the structure here that I'm describing. I've got the surrounding waterway that's right next to Big Ben. What's it for? An observation or observatory. Something is watched or observed, and I had the perspective of being up in the tower looking down. Now, on this target has an aspect that is or can be used for observation. What's observed? Things are slow moving. You're high up looking down. It's linear. I see the observer looking down, moving their head, scanning left to right at something below. So if you're up high, you're looking down, you're just looking left to right, you're watching. So I knew there was a vantage from up high. Looking at my stage 4 here, potential energy. There was anticipation, anxiety right before an event, a known moment in time or history. I felt nervous about this. This is pre-movement, right before, and again, I'm on my rocket thing here, launch. But again, if my tasking was at noon when the bell tolls, yes, it's going to have to deal with anxiety right before an event. Not that you're nervous, but if you're there as a tourist and you're going to be waiting for noon to hear the bell, you're going to have that feeling of anticipation. I start to go catastrophe in my mind as I'm analyzing the data in session, which just becomes noise here. But I had it as an epicenter, a central location, or a centralized. There is a moment, an instant that feels shocking and jarring. Well, that would be the dong as the bell is tolling, right? And then again, I took that and I went into destruction mode. Collapse, dismantle, centralized, closing the envelope. I don't know what this is. I had this shape here, like a clam closing up. So I need to look at the mechanics. Maybe the mechanical piece of the bell itself, of the clock, has some kind of opening and closing gears. I don't know. Or it might be noise. I just looked at contemplation. What was that person contemplating here? Making a decision or a choice. To contemplate is to ponder or wonder. Wonder about the origins, the concepts, the original designs, intents, and purposes. This inspiring deep thought, introspection, and philosophical thought for those that take the time. This is the silent journey for one who travels inward. This taxing and physically exhausting, mentally draining, but inspiring, so we push on. It has nothing to do with Big Ben. And there's no way I can say there was a person there thinking that. But I'm going to come back to that. I look at dismantle. This was my AOL for destruction here. To take apart, to dissect, to break down into basic parts, elements of something greater, destruction, destroy, to make broken, to reduce to its basic pieces and components, rubble, hardware, software, as in contemplation, planning, ideas, and concepts, or storage, brought back to or reduced to the Stone Age. The story stops here. So I ended up going off on this tangent, and I'm not going to go through and try to justify every piece of data. I am going to say something that makes it sound like that, though. Um, Here's my only thought. Now, let me be quite clear. There's noise in here. There are elements of target contact, and I'm taking those elements for what they are. And there are elements for noise, 100%. I want to go on the what if thing because me, I like my mind to go there to try to understand what's happening here. I'm not trying to justify the data that's noise, that's not related to the target. I want to be very clear about that. However, what if I had that moment where I'm looking at the target pool? Should I pick this target? Should I pick this one? I bounced around a little bit. I almost picked one, and then I picked the one that I went with. What if this session is reflective of the probability, and I'm gathering data from 2 or more target IDs, and it's not noise? I promise you, I'm not trying to justify it. There's no way I can prove it. I'm not trying to justify my noise because right now that's all that it is noise. But I would like to take that step back and wonder about what is the future? How does it work? Is it set? Is it probability? Did I just unknowingly complete and conduct an experiment in probable outcomes? How would we ever verify that? I have no idea. Maybe minds smarter than mine can come up with an idea on how to verify something like that. But I do have to wonder if there's another target out there. Maybe as I work through the target pool, oh, there we go. That's the connection, right? I'll keep that in mind. And as I work through the target pool, um, let me think this through. I'm not sure if I'm going to do this, but I wonder if I was to right now select a secondary target at random, if it would fit that noise data. That would be a neat experiment. I'm going to think on that. And it's up to you guys to trust my integrity to not fish for something that happens to match. The way I would set it up would be I'm going to select one more target and see if that target fits. I'm not trying to justify my data. This is me trying to understand remote viewing, the process, and how it works. And what I'm learning is that the more specific I can get with the feedback, the better it is. It helps better calibrate my mind to keep me on target. So in a future target, I'm not getting bleed over from other targets. And I know some of you have talked about this out there. People more experienced than me have probably gone down this path, but I'd love to know your thoughts. Is this just noise, or is it possible I'm picking up a target I haven't yet looked at? Will I look at the target? And if I do, is it going to correlate to that other information? I don't know. All right, friends, that's my 2 cents on this aspect of remote viewing. I always welcome your feedback as it helps me to better understand my own mind and this whole crazy wacky thing called remote viewing and time and space. It's really fascinating, and I'm thankful to be on this journey. So, let me know your thoughts. Dennis Nappy II. Thanks for watching.